Hi everyone, my name is James Feeney. Welcome to or back to my channel. Today I want to talk about the new moon, specifically practices, spell working, intention setting, ritual and ceremony surrounding the new moon. For me personally, I find that I am conducting more magic and working more heavily with the new moon than I am the full moon. It also sometimes feels like the full moon gets too much credit to the detriment of the new moon. There's this sort of glorified aspect in pop culture and modern magic surrounding the full moon, and the new moon seems to be ignored or shunned a little bit, and then there are some connotations of negativity and darkness that is negative, or that darkness as an adjective or a term is inherently negative, which I also don't find to be the case. So I thought we would have a little dialogue and chat about the new moon. Today is a new moon. It won't be when this goes up, but it is today. And I find that I am preparing for my workings with the new moon. And so I have some materials here, and I thought I would share some tips and tricks and findings that I have come across through my experience, and hopefully they can be helpful for anybody out there looking for these sorts of tips and tricks. Likewise, I'd welcome your tips and tricks and findings in the comments down below, especially if they are in opposition to or don't align with my own. I think it's so fascinating that some have very different findings from others in similar categories, and so I'm always looking to learn from others. So with that being said, I thought I would first get into the types of magic I think are best suited to the new moon and the workings that I find to work the best on new moons. So the first and biggest one is going to be banishing magic for me anyway, and I have a video on banishing magic, so I'll link that up wherever it would show up in the cards. But I recommend checking that out if you're curious about my banishing magic practices and opinions and findings. But banishing magic is a big one for me. I won't get too detailed on that one because there is the video. Another one is cleansing of any sort. I find that the darkness and the lack of light and this sort of it's almost cleansing in a way. There's an absence, and that absence is just an absence of anything, and so to cleanse whatever it is that you're seeking to cleanse is perfect, because we are taking away from, there's this low point, and we're at the stage where there should be a blank slate, and in doing so we are then cleansing. And a way that I cleanse very often that I think is unique to me or unique to my practice is through a rattle. Well, it's not unique in that no others do it, but I find that a lot of people go for herb bundles and incense, and I really do appreciate those as well, but I'm very sensitive to the smoke, and so it's irritating for me. So for those who are looking for alternatives, rattles are great. Sound cleansing of any sort I find is really great. I love sound magic. You can use chimes, rattles. I find that a rattle is really great because it's disruptive in a way, so it shakes up stagnant or negative energy, little pockets in my room or around me. I'll also take my Athmay, and I will sort of do this, I will run it along myself over my whole body, almost like I am sloughing off an outer layer of stagnant or dead energy, so to speak. So I will use here this Athmay, and I'll sort of just run it along myself and imagine that there's this very staticky, maybe frenetic type of energy around myself that's being set free in a way. So in a way it is like banishing, and it's also like a sort of detachment magic, but it's also cleansing in a way. I'm cleansing the energies around myself, and then I'll use for the space that I inhabit, my room, my house, I'll use the rattle, and then sometimes I'll do an herb bundle or an incense of some sort, but I tend to keep that to a minimum. So cleansing is great during the new moon for that reason. I also find that there's this dark, introspective, mysterious aspect that allows for us to turn inward. So shadow work and introspective work is heightened, and for lack of a better term, high magic, magic that is inner or connecting to the self in a higher way, is well suited to the new moon, I find. I will sometimes scry with my obsidian sphere or orb. Crystals of all sorts that are dark and earthy, I think, are well suited to the new moon. Although obsidian is technically a volcanic glass and not a crystal, the same sort of notes apply. This is a heavy and deep and dark and introspective tool, and for me, I use it specifically on the new moon, especially because it mirrors a dark moon in a way. It's an orb that is black, which is basically what we are in essence seeing in the sky, and within a darkness, there's the ability to then look elsewhere or to not see, so you have to see in a different sort of way. That's what happens when, for example, somebody is blind or there's an absence of light that doesn't allow for literal physical sight. So something to the ego is then inhibited in a way, I find. Our sense that is conscious is taken away, and so we have to turn to the unconscious, or we're able to dive into a depth that we weren't previously allowed access to because something is taken away from us. This light is absent, and so I will have a pen and paper, and I will scry within this orb, and I find that I have better results on the new moon. Likewise, I have, and I showed these in my banishing magic video, but jewelry, I will wear these sort of talismans to me that I find are very symbolic of the new moon. So these are black onyx, I believe, and then I have the accompanying necklace. So talismans of any sort that are associated with introspective, darker, deeper aspects of the self are great. So maybe you have some sort of jewelry or some sort of dress or garb that you'd like to wear on the new moon that you think is well suited to the practices at hand. You're almost preparing mentally, and when you feel like you're in that space and you're embodying what it is that you are trying to interact with, it tends to go better, in my opinion. So maybe you want to wear all black, or wearing a cloak of some sort is something that you like to do. Next, I have a cauldron, and this speaks more so to that deeper returning aspect, that introspective and reflective aspect that I find is well suited to the new moon. When I pulled out that Obsidian Sphere for divination, I think divination of any sort is actually heightened on a new moon. There's a difference, at least, to it. So, for example, pulling tarot or oracle cards on a new moon, to me, I'm hitting deeper levels of myself. I find that my intuition in terms of myself, not my outer world, but myself, is heightened, and so in that way, I am going to conduct readings surrounding who I am, my emotional state, my potential life path, or to have a sort of maybe aid in individuation in terms of coming to terms with and better acquainting oneself with the self and the unconscious, because our ego and conscious mind is always at the forefront, and the new moon is one time when I feel like the script is switched a little bit. So I have this cauldron, and this to me is about renewal, and I think that the new moon is a great time for renewal of sorts, because it is cleansing, like I mentioned. When one is cleansing, there is a renewing aspect to that. We are reborn once we are cleansed. There's a blank slate, just as the moon is at its sort of blank slate stage, and from there it will grow and it will become something. So the cauldron to me on a new moon is very symbolic. It's very watery, but watery in a less outwardly emotive or heightened emotive way. It's more of this deep, calm stillness in emotion, and so a symbolic cauldron for me is always important. I work with the Sheila Nagig, and she is my matron, a goddess that I work with, and I find that she is very attuned and tied to darkness, hidden mysteries, unveiling of things, liminal spaces. So there is also this thinning of the veil or accessibility to mystery on a new moon that I think is not so prevalent or accessible on other phases of the moon. So if you're looking to uncover or maybe do ancestor work, spirit work, mediumship, working with deities that are more tied in with darker, mysterious aspects. And when I say darker, I don't hold the connotation that dark means negative. For me, it's very much a positive and helpful aspect, or yeah, aspect in a duality. From light to dark, neither is better or worse, negative or positive, but darkness does hold its place and is very valuable, especially on the new moon. So to tap into and embrace darkness for what it offers oneself or your practice is very valuable. I think if we are one-sided in that we just look to the full moon for its illumination, power, manifestation, and light, then we're missing out on a whole other world of magic that is available to us, a whole other aspect of ourselves that exists but is sometimes ignored. And I could actually benefit from probably working more with the full moon. So if anybody wants to speak on that, I'd be very curious. And I know that there's a lot out there on the full moon, but cauldron work is a big one for me in a more symbolic way. Rather than burning something in the cauldron or filling it with water, I will look to it as a symbol for where I'm at and the processes that I'm conducting and going through on the new moon. Next, I have a skull here. I find that on the new moon, the cycles of birth, death, and rebirth are heightened or called upon. I think that darkness is an aspect in all of the liminal stages. So to be born, or the conception, one is in darkness and then brought into light. To die is to be brought into darkness. To be reborn is to leave darkness. And so a skull for me is very symbolic of the comings and goings and cyclical nature of existence and various states and forms of being. So there's something very in between, liminal, and also cyclical about the new moon. Of course, the moon cycle in and of itself is cyclical in nature, but that I find the darker aspects of the moon, the waning and the new moon, are very much tied in with the cycles of life. And so I like to reflect on my various deaths within life, how, for example, I believe that we undergo many deaths in a single lifetime that allow for rebirth and growth in various ways, similar to how we see change in the death card in tarot. We go through many deaths within our life, and those changes allow for growth. And so I will work with the symbolism of a skull and the symbolism of a snake. I really do love snakes. And for me, these symbols, archetypes, or at least what these symbols tie themselves to and relate to, are very prevalent for me on the nights of new moons. And so I'm looking to transform. So if there's any aspect of myself that I want to leave behind or sort of signal a death to, maybe mourn the loss of an aspect of myself, that maybe sounds a little bit dramatic, but if I'm looking to detach an aspect of myself or leave something in the past, maybe it's an old habit, maybe it's a way that I conduct myself or something I do or an aspect that I am looking to leave behind in favor of growing towards something new, I'm going to do that on the new moon, and I'm going to use these symbols of the snake and the skull to maybe solidify the loss and the death of those things within myself or of myself. And so for that reason, I really enjoy working with skulls and snakes on the new moon. Next, we have some grounding stones. For me, the new moon is much more linked with water and earth than it is with fire and air. For me, the more active elements of fire and air are tied in with the full moon, and the new moon in its receptivity is more linked to earth and water. And many a time I will turn to various crystals and meditations that are earthy in nature, that are grounding, that are protective, that are cleansing and renewing and centering in some way. For me, meditation and centering on a new moon is key. I don't tend to do that as much on full moons. On full moons, I'm much more active. I'm trying to manifest, to create. I feel more, active. And on new moons, I tend to be more passive in a way. Passive to the forces around me, passive to what will come. And so I will call upon, or not call upon, but use these crystals to call upon that within myself. I like to work with crystals specifically, so this would be hematite. To me, this is one of the most grounding stones that I work with in meditation, and so I may hold that. We have some moss agate, which to me is spiritually earthly connected. So this would be more of this sacred and divine aspect that comes with the element of earth. And then we have some smoky quartz, and for me this is cleansing, renewing, it absorbs and clarifies in a way. And so these are all stones that I might use in my various practices, but meditation of any sort, centering and grounding, is crucial and key for me on the new moon. In order to start that new cycle of growth, I need to have a really strong foundation, and like I said before, the clean slate where we are cleansing and allowing to have this almost zero, this starting from zero and working our way up. That's how I view the new moon. Each new moon for me is a blank slate where I am going to have opportunity to make something from nothing in a way. And the final thing that I have over here is just this black feather. And I think that symbolism of any sort that is dark or that evokes some sort of emotion or sensory reaction or visceral reaction within yourself is going to be key during the new moon. Something that, in a way, calls to you. So the new moon to me is linked to the unexplainable, things that we feel or react to, and trying to understand those things. Like I spoke about, there being this link to the unconscious and the mysteries and the deeper aspects of self and introspection. Anything that you find that you are reacting to or that causes or evokes a reaction within you is something that I like to bring into practices on the new moon. That's the time for me when I'm able to understand those things and push myself to dig deep and find why I react to something, find why I feel called to something. Sometimes when you feel like there's a link between yourself and somebody else, yourself and an item, yourself and an emotion or a symbol, that's the time, well, the new moon is the time when I would want to investigate that and hopefully divine those answers. So again, calling back to that aspect of divination and as it pertains to shadow work and introspective, reflective work. So all of that is going to be really potent and powerful on a new moon, for me at least. So those are just a few of the things that I like to do on the new moon. I'd be curious to know what your practices are like on the new moon, if you prefer the full or the new moon, and what all that entails for you. Like and subscribe if this was helpful and fun. I hope you are all well. Until next time, bye.